Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Fingers crossed the technology holds out for us this afternoon. It's typical Murphy's Law, but we've just had an NBN outage at my apartment. It's taken out 2 kids' Zoom calls plus mine, but we're back and it looks like it's stable now for the moment. I wish whoever it is the NBN that keeps tripping over the cables would stop doing that. This afternoon is a little bit different than the last couple of webinars. We want to give you a little bit of a update on MiWater's future and some recent changes, and particularly the change in its name and the argument and the discussion about naming and why we've gone down that path. So MiWater has become Aqualus. And the reason for the change is that unfortunately MiWater is not a name that we can trademark. It actually is a trademark that belongs to other people, and we can, and it prevents us from being able to use the name elsewhere in the world. It also creates some challenges with respect to the addition of new products in the software suite. So while MiWater makes sense and MiSewer makes sense, what we're effectively making is a brand called Mi. And unfortunately, that doesn't really work for us, particularly in the US. MI is Michigan, and so Michigan Water uses the brand MiWater. There's also some other software companies around the place that use that. So unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on which way you look at it, we've refreshed the branding of MiWater. You'll notice we've kept the same drop logo, same color scheme, same look and feel, and fundamentally the same product under the covers. For those of you who already use MiWater, really the only change you'll notice in the coming days and weeks will be the MiWater logo will eventually be replaced by the Aqualus logo. But other than that, it's exactly the same product. This has been a really big decision for us. MiWater has had a very good reputation in the market. It's got really good brand recognition, not only here, but internationally. MiWater has won international awards, particularly the work that Mackay Regional Council has done with the software. But what we believe is that by giving it its own unique name, this is a brand that we can go forward with, as I said, internationally. Australia, Asia, Europe, and the US. So the way the naming will work is that MiWater becomes Aqualus Water. We're actually at version 10.1 at the moment, which is the first release in the 10th year, which gives you a sense as to how mature the software is and how many iterations that Aqualus has gone through, MiWater has gone through over the past decade. Built with water utilities, expanded with requirements. I think we've now got over 25 water utilities around Australia using MiWater. It's become the de facto metadata management platform here in Australia, and also starting to get international recognition. We'll touch on that in just a moment. The field application becomes the Aqualus field app. The customer portal is the Aqualus customer portal. And each water utility will name the customer portal whatever they would like to name the portal, the way they would like to provide their branding. So I think Mackay uses MyH2O and SA Water uses MySmartWater. I think City Wet Water is using Tapped In. The branding for the customer portal, as far as the end consumer is concerned, is entirely up to the water utility, but internally we'll just refer to it as the customer portal. But we do have a bit of an announcement about the way we're doing 2 new products. So the product previously known as MiSewer will be renamed into Aqualus Sewer. But we've also had utilities, and in particular Townsville, one person that will remain unnamed, who's been using the MiSewer application to do things that are not strictly sewer related. Townsville has been doing a lot of work on the pressure monitoring of the reticulation network. And so we've effectively split the branding of that software into Aqualus Sewer and Aqualus Network. Fundamentally, under the covers, it's the same software. You can actually have sewer and network in the same place. But in order to be able to explain what it is we do to new prospects, we'll actually describe that from a product portfolio as two different products. So Aqualus Network is mostly related to the drinking water reticulation network, and then Aqualus Sewer, obviously the wastewater networks. Similar to previous webinars, if you do have any questions about any of this at any point, please use the chat window. If you can't find the chat window, it's hidden under the ellipsis, the three little dots to the right of the Zoom menu. Feel free to type into that, and I'll keep an eye on new questions as they come up. But we also have some other interesting news about naming, and that is many of you who know Taggle know that we've had a long-term partnership with Honeywell, and that off the success of our relationship in Australia, Honeywell is actually representing Taggle's products in the US, effectively as a reseller. And just recently we've made a decision that in the North American market, when Honeywell is selling MiWater, they'll actually bundle it in under a brand that they offer in the United States called Honeywell Videre. The root of the word Videre is to see, and it's the suite of products that they use for smart electricity networks, smart gas networks, and now smart water networks. And you may notice the software looks exactly the same, but we have the Honeywell Videre logo instead of the MiWater logo. And ultimately, I think this just makes the product stronger. So the development of this will continue in Australia. Steve Tighe's team will continue to be the core of the MiWater development team. And we'll continue to develop this product, but now we have customers not only in Australia, but in the US. Fundamentally, the problem is the same. Water utilities in the US operate very much like water utilities in Australia. They only have a few idiosyncrasies, one of which is gallons, and the other one of which is cubic feet, both of which make my head hurt. But Steve's team has worked out how to internationalize those aspects of the software. So when we're thinking about the future of MiWater, which is sort of really the subject of today, I did want to touch on some of the things that we're thinking about next. Taggle took the reins of the MiWater development at the beginning of last year, after having a strong relationship with Mackay Regional Council for the many years before that. When we took the reins of the development, Taggle's invested a lot of money into new features and functionality around MiWater, and obviously the development of MiSewer. And I'm giving you a little bit of a sneak peek into what might be coming, or what is coming in the future of the Aqualus Water Suite. The first of those is an installable customer app with providing support for iOS and Android mobile phones. Historically, the customer portal has been around, but using the browsers on the smartphone. But there are many people who really like the idea of having an app that they can install locally on their phone. That's the most common way people interact with their mobile phones today. Functionally, it'll be pretty much the same as the web browser version, but they'll be able to have that locally on their phone. And that provides a couple of extra functionality features, such as getting a push notification on the phone rather than an SMS text message, but fundamentally providing the same sort of benefits. We actually have a prototype, well, actually not a prototype, like a first customer using a iOS app. And that's Golden Fields Water has done all of that work, and the installable customer app here will be based on the work that Steve Tighe's team and Golden Fields did to produce that first version of a installable mobile app. So we're expecting that in the coming months. That's the highest priority on our development roadmap in terms of next features. If anybody wants to know a little bit more about that, obviously give me a call. The next cabs off the rank in terms of products is potentially a product called Aqualus Telemetry.
Next week or something. Oh, next week, sorry. Yeah.
So Aqualus Telemetry is actually a product already in place and has been operating in the in Mackay Regional Council, actually monitoring their landfill leachate system. So it monitors the movements of leachate, so contaminated water coming out of the landfill, coming out of various landfills, going into the leachate pond, and being pumped back up into the leachate or being taken away. We're developing that into a standalone product that can be used for any sort of process monitoring. So Aqualus Telemetry will be SCADA-like. It's not intended to be a replacement for mission critical SCADA systems, but where there are process type systems that a customer is keen to manage, there'll be a product in the Aqualus suite designed for this process oriented view of a system. And while not necessarily relevant to the water utilities directly, we have also developed a version of the software specifically targeted to the agricultural sector. Its product's name is Taggle, and you'd be surprised how similar the problems are between water utilities and farms in terms of collecting data. Water is obviously one of the highest priorities, but the decisions that a farmer makes are different than the decisions a water utility makes. So there are some benefits in tailoring software specifically to their needs. So Taggle is designed for the agricultural sector. It includes soil moisture sensors, weather sensors, rainfall gauges, tank levels, irrigation monitoring. But again, very much the same suite of sensors that water utilities use, with potentially the additional ones like the soil moisture, those sorts of things. So anyway, so those are all coming soon. I expect all of those during the 2020 calendar year. Like the development of all of our software, we very much like the idea of working in conjunction with our customers even before a product is released. So the Aqualus Sewer software, based on work that Mackay Regional Council has been doing over many years, pushed very heavily, developed with input from Townsville Regional Council, who've been doing work on their sewer and on their reticulation network. Feature requests are coming from our customers, and the products are evolving based on what our utility customers and agricultural customers are actually asking for. So if any of these struck you as products that might be relevant to you, and you're very keen to see particular features included in any of those, we're very interested to hear from you. And then on the proviso that these are still works in progress, there is obviously no end to the things that you can do with software. Later in the year, we expect to release Aqualus version 10.2 with a refreshed user interface. Some of the charting libraries that are in the current version could get a bit of a refresh in the way the colors are presented to make them a little bit easier on the eye. If things are easier on the eye, it's easier to see patterns and insights. So here's a mock-up of what that might look like in the next version. And immediately after that, our focus will be extending the capabilities, but far more into the analytics space. So forecasting is one of those things that all water utilities do for their future demand. It's important for managing reservoir levels, but we think there's benefits in using the data from smart meters and other IoT style sensors. That extra granularity can provide forecasting at a more granular level. And so there's forecasting and analytics coming in future versions. advanced alerts and alarms based on forecasts of future events and not just events that have occurred in the past. And alarms that take into account the behaviours of dozens, hundreds, or thousands, or potentially even tens of thousands of sensors. Patterns across tens of thousands of sensors can generate an alarm rather than just relying on individual sensors to trigger alarms. And in order to be able to achieve all of that, there's a fair degree of machine learning and artificial intelligence style software that will go into the software at a core level. A lot of that work has been done over the past years. Taggle's invested quite heavily in researching machine learning and AI algorithms and how it applies to water data. But this will be the first time that knowledge becomes available in a software product to our end customers. So for those of you who don't know the Aqualus Water or the MiWater suite, I might just touch on a few features just there. The product is predominantly focused on the management of the data from smart meters, making sense of tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of smart meters providing data. There's very few analytics products out there that actually understand what a water network looks like and how it operates. Aqualus Water is focused exclusively on making sense of that in a water utility context. So on the left-hand side, dashboards that provide insights into highest water users, possible leaks. On the right-hand side, charts that show district metered areas, mass balance charts. This middle one here shows the consequence of a water mains break and how much water was supplied to the network versus how much was consumed. The algorithms that identify leaks, and in this case a growing leak that was rectified out here on the right-hand side, and how much water can be lost to a growing leak, potentially a concealed leak in a customer's property. Aqualus Water already includes algorithms for detection of customer-side leaks. These two charts show the difference between a normal pattern and a customer that has an ongoing leak, and the water consumption never goes to zero. These algorithms within Aqualus Water are designed to help the water utility make sense of their smart meter data. And it's only the management of that data in the aggregate that allows a water utility to be able to practically operate this. It's very easy to identify a leak in a single property. It's a little bit harder to be monitoring 50,000, 100,000 properties and triggering the processes associated with leak management, leak notifications, and actually deciding what to do when 5, 10, 15% of your properties are showing leaks. Aqualus Water already has quite substantial capabilities with managing the aggregate data across smart meters. So what we're looking at here is a polygon around a district metered area. This allows a water utility to be able to look at the behaviours of groups of properties, groups of consumers. And this is existing capability, but you can get a sense as to where the product is going. The more automated features, the more analytics that can occur in the background, the more a utility can make sense of all of this data without having to add teams of data scientists to be able to comb through the data and find these behaviours themselves. So I might leave it on the district metered area slide right at the moment. So this is a page showing the behaviour of a district metered area. This area up here is indicated by this shape up here, this polygon up here, all of the properties in this area are supplied by a single supply meter. And in this particular area, we've had 3,926 kilolitres supplied. No kilolitres were taken out of that district area to feed another district area, but if there was, we would be able to identify that. And the water consumed inside the DMA was 3,026 kilolitres. That says over the last 7 days, we've lost an average of 900 kilolitres. And that's a not insignificant amount of water. This sort of mass balance can be done on district meters and using billing readings every quarter. You can have a look at mass balance. But it's not until you have this high resolution hourly data that you can actually start to make sense of that as to what's exactly going on. On this chart down here, this is a time series chart between the 16th of January and the 30th of January, plotting data every hour. The dark blue line is the supply to the district metered area, and the light blue line is all of the water consumed in that area. And you'll see that it tracks fairly closely. There is a minor difference between those two, which could indicate a minor leak in the network. But it's when you see patterns like this one here, or more significantly, this one over here on the right, the water consumed in the network maintained that sort of dual peak diurnal pattern. But the water taken, supplied to the district metered area was substantially higher, basically from the morning until about lunchtime on the 28th of January. And then it returned back to normal where it's tracking together. It's that deviation that the area under that curve is non-revenue water. That looks very much like somebody using a standpipe or a fire service taking water during the morning of the 28th of January. It's when you have this high resolution data that you can see the patterns in all of this. Now that's really obvious to a human. And the future of Aqualus water is to have those sorts of events identified by a machine and allow the water utility to be able to manage these things rather than having to stare at the screens on a daily basis or a weekly basis, actually having the software draw your attention to anomalies, which gives you the ability to manage by exception. Rather than either staring at the screen for an extended period of time or potentially missing these events by not being able to have resources to watch the screens. But anyway, so that's basically all of my prepared content for today. If anybody's got any questions, please post those to the chat window. I don't see any questions just yet, but I will wait and give you a few minutes. So we have a question from Ryan McGowan asking if you already have a customer portal, can you embed MiWater into it? That is a very good question. So far, most of our water utilities have chosen to deploy the MiWater, now Aqualus customer portal, as a standalone tool. But we do fully anticipate that this will be something that customers ask for on a more common basis. The data that is inside the customer portal can be embedded in other systems. We don't have a toolkit yet to pull apart the customer portal and put the pieces in the appropriate places, but it's absolutely possible to do on a project by project basis. So if you've already got a system that knows who your customers are and that allows them to have a username and password, that's actually half the job done. And if that's the case, we'd be very keen to be able to present the customer content into your existing portal. There's a question from Matt about how the field operations system works with systems like Maximo or other enterprise asset management systems. The way the Fields tablet works is it uses the Aqualus water meter data management system as its source of truth. So the interactions between the Fields tablet and the core MDMS work out of the box. And then the integration points are between the MDMS and the asset management system. The experience with MiWater for the past 10 years has been that it's almost impossible to run it standalone. You always need information about who your customers are, always needs to tie to your property management system. The outputs of it all eventually have to end up in the billing system. And the integration with asset management systems is one of those things that utilities are keen to look at. I have noticed that pretty well every utility we've spoken to does things a slightly different way. We're just finalising an out-of-the-box integration with Ascetic as an asset management system. We have had conversations with utilities about building that bridge to connect it with Maximo for asset management. And so if you are keen to be able to do that in your context, very keen to talk to you about it. It'd be something that we would do on a project-by-project basis, but asset integration is a core capability of the system. A question about the name Aqualus. That was a long and extended exercise. It is surprisingly difficult to find a name that has not been trademarked or had the URL, the domain name, registered by somebody. We wanted to be very clear that this was a water-specific product. Around the world, there are many meter data management systems, but all of them began in the electricity sector. And electricity meter data management systems don't do a very good job of understanding how water systems work. So the water utility who uses a electricity MDMS misses out on all of the water-oriented analytics. You might be able to do customer billing, but you can't really do things like leak detection, mass balance, those sorts of things. So we wanted to make it really clear about how the product was focused on water. And it took us an extended period of time searching trademarks and domain names to be able to find something water-oriented that was free to register. And while it takes a while for Aqualus as a name to fit in your mouth and to become part of a sentence, I do think it's something that's going to have longevity and people will learn, just like MiWater. Let me make sure I've got all the questions. So a question from Stephen about how much of the district metered area needs to be metered to make sense for mass balance. I don't think I have an answer to that off the top of my head. I think you can do minimum nightly flows on a district metered area without any consumption meters. But I think the more consumption meters that you put into the system, the clearer those patterns will emerge. My gut feeling would be 10 or 20% would be the absolute minimum to see any patterns, and 50 to 80% to be really useful. But 100% is where it really critically kicks in, because if you've only got 80% of your consumption meters in there, and you see what looks like a leak, it could very well be that there's a commercial customer who does use water on a 24-hour basis, and that it's perfectly valid that water is being consumed. But it's certainly something I'm keen to explore with you, Stephen. So if there's, we might take that question offline and actually have a look at and see whether the data we've got makes sense from a district metered area mass balance basis. So a question from Amy about how MiWater integrates with billing systems. Most billing systems, and including Civica, use recognise that there is a commonly used standard in the market called MVRS. It's the file format that has come out of handheld meter reading devices for a very, very long time. And so MiWater, Aqualus Water, will generate MVRS billing files that will automatically upload and import into Civica. There are other integration points that are important, and those are things like details about properties and property owners. Civica has not historically been particularly easy to work with, but strangely enough, actually, just this year, we've been contacted by Civica Authority's product managers, recognizing that our customers are some of their customers, or most of their customers, and that integration is something that they're actually putting a lot of money into right now to make these integrations work out of the box. So it's entirely possible that Aqualus will be the first Civica Authority certified integration partner, or at least in the first few, which will make Civica integration far, far easier. That being said, while it has been a challenge, it's been done for every single customer that we've got that has got Civica, and that's quite a lot of them. We've had that integration working and have had it over the years. There's a question about whether the domain and email addresses will change. They will progressively, but both will still work. If you go to the MiWater.com site, or if you go to the Aqualus site, you'll end up at the same place. You won't lose track of us. We recognise MiWater has a lot of market traction, right through to parts of Southeast Asia. So we've been speaking with water utilities in Singapore and Hong Kong, and been in contact through partners with Indonesia and elsewhere, Japan, and they recognise that MiWater has a product that has track record. So we won't want to lose contact with that. We'll make sure that everything ends up in the same place. I think I've answered all the questions. If I've missed any, feel free to repost those. Okay, if there are no more questions, I think that's probably a point at which we can wrap up. I will stay online if anybody does have any final questions. I'll stay online for a few more minutes, but for everyone else, thank you very much for attending today, and I hope to speak to you soon.